and we're looking at what our options are for the fall. And what our desired approach would be is to see if we can meet in person, but also have the technology set up that if people aren't able to come to the meeting or they're vacationing in Florida, that they would be able to watch the meeting live. And then our third option would be, like we're doing now, is record the meeting for people to watch at a later point. So that's kind of what our optimal approach for the fall would be. The challenge we will have is that the Radisson and many other venues where we could meet in person have substantially changed, in some cases gone out of business. So we'll be working over the next 2 or 3 months to see if we can find a venue to meet, and we'll need to find one, if we're going to do this, that has a robust internet connection so we can pull these things together. But we want to let you know that's kind of the direction we're going to try to move forward with in the fall. Another thing that we'd like to let people know is that this next meeting in May will be when we traditionally elect officers. And we've got a slate of officers that will propose. The only change from where we are now is Chuck Wadey has agreed to take over from Jennifer. Big shoes to fill, Chuck, but we think you're up for it.
Yeah.
If other people want to be involved or run for office, please let us know and we'll have you on at the May meeting. The last thing I wanted to point out, or two other things I wanted to point out, is Chuck will be working on our fall program. So if there are topics like John suggested, for example, potential topics, potential speakers, let Chuck or any one of us know so we can start putting that lineup together. The more people we have looking for speakers, looking for ideas, the more effective we'll be.
Okay.
Also, as I'd mentioned, we'll be looking for venues to meet in the future. So as things start to open up, if you're out and about in at a place where you think might be a good venue for the organization, please let us know about it so we can explore that. With that, any questions or comments from the group? Sounds good. Matthew, I think we'll move to your presentation. Our speaker this evening is Matthew Prigge. Matthew is a freelance author and historian in the Milwaukee area. He's got, I believe, 5 books published and is working on number 6. If he can pull up a topic on that. And he is also, something I would like to do sometime in the future, if we can do it, is he works as a guide for harbor cruises in the Milwaukee area, which I think would be a fun outing to do. So Matthew, the floor is yours.
I would just ask that everybody turn their microphones off and put it on mute so we all can hear Matthew. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm just going to do this so you can see my slideshow presentation I have. And thank you to Bill, thank you to the group for hosting me, and thank you to everybody for showing up this evening. So yeah, I had to count it myself, but yeah, contributed to 5 books and working on numbers 6, 7, and 8 all at once, which is why I can't get anything done. But the one we're talking about tonight is Damn the Old Tinderbox, Milwaukee's Palace of the West. Excuse me. and the fire that defined an era. This one came out in 2019 or 20, I don't even remember. 2019. So this was my newest one, and I was had worked on this. I spent about 2.5 years researching the Newhall house and the fire that destroyed it. This is usually when I'm speaking in front of a group or at a library or whatever, when I ask everybody, to raise your hand if you've heard of the Newhall house. So I'll just assume maybe about half of the people have heard of it before, because it is in Milwaukee history, maybe less so statewide, but it is a known event. It gets mentioned in the history books. But I found while I was doing this research that a lot of the story of the fire, as it was popularly retold, was steeped in quite a bit of myth about the fire itself, about the hotel itself. And as I started getting like really deep into this research, I realized this was as much a story about the city of Milwaukee and its development as it was about any particular building or any particular fire. So I'm going to just kind of run through the basics of the event, the hotel, and the aftermath, which is mirrored on the structure of the book. It's broken into 3 parts: one on the hotel, one on the fire, and then one on what came later. So to start off, we are going to look at the Newhall House Hotel around 1857 when it opened. Now, the 1850s in Milwaukee
I'm fucking ad in here.
are a time of
now this is all I get.
remarkable growth. There's a lot of optimism in the area. This was at that time, the American West. This was the frontier. There is a competition at the time between Milwaukee and the city of Milwaukee and the city of Chicago for growth, for attracting investors. There was an attitude in Milwaukee, especially among civic boosters, city leaders, business leaders, that Milwaukee could really gain the upper hand on Chicago and become the capital of this new segment of the American continent. Now, again, up until about 1850, the population of Milwaukee and Chicago weren't really all that different. Now, of course, as a lot of you know, there was an event or a technological development in the 1850s that really ended that for good, and that was the bringing of the railroads to the American, again, what was at that time the American West. Of course, Chicago much better positioned, although it's not that much farther south than Milwaukee. It's right at the bottom of Lake Michigan, and that location made it really the artery between the growing West and the industrialized East. Everything that came out of the West flowed through Chicago. So Milwaukee had this, and this was, people then couldn't really perceive this at the time, but there was in the 1850s, as Chicago and Milwaukee began to separate a little bit, there was this thinking among, again, the civic boosters in Milwaukee that they just needed something to gain the edge on Chicago. And this idea took hold in the early 1850s that a first-class hotel was needed in the city to one-up Chicago, to make it the destination that Chicago wasn't. And the role of the hotels played at that time was, now it's kind of taken for granted what hotels do, but especially for these developing cities in the West, to have a grand hotel that could remind people of what they might have in New York or Philadelphia or Boston was a huge point of local pride, because it was hotels, any sort of hostelry at that time was an indication that people wanted to come there and in visits, and in that visiting, look for money. They look for ways they could spend money to help the this area developed, and to have a very high-class hotel, again, something that would make them feel at home, that was considered to be, you know, a big part of getting that big money from the East. Now, the hotel itself was, there are many stops and starts in trying to build this this dream hotel. The Milwaukee Sentinel, the the city's, excuse me, dominant English language paper of the time, was a huge backer of the hotel project. And finally, in 1855, Daniel Newhall, who made his fortune in grain trafficking, he agrees to build the new hotel. And this is, you know, the only, maybe the best parallel I can think of today is building something like a baseball stadium or a sports arena. It's an investment. Certainly, he expected to make a profit off of it, but it is seen as, you know, a civic possession, something that's going to make a city, not a term that would have used at the time, but today you think of a city as, you know, the major league or something like that. So he builds this hotel, and he really, you know, the old cliche of sparing no expense. Again, this is what we've got here, very close to its opening. It gets, as it opens, it gets rave reviews. They send out invitations to newspaper editors from all across the Midwest to come and see this. Everyone is taken with this hotel. No one can say a bad word about it. It also happens to be, perhaps at the time, among the very tallest buildings in the country. It's only 6 stories. I think the recorded height of it is something like 140 some feet. So not terribly tall, but again, at the time, pre-elevator, this was about as tall as buildings got. And it was finding, you know, documentation of how tall buildings were back then is difficult. I was really thinking in terms of height as being a, you know, goal, something that you would strive to build the tallest of whatever, but it was either a little bit taller or a little bit shorter than the Jane Building in Philadelphia, which is considered to be, or kind of, well, before I did my research, was kind of considered to be at the time the tallest building in the country. But the Newhall, again, if not taller, right along with it. So this is a very grand building. This is a very this is a very optimistic view of what Milwaukee might have to come. Very ambitious was the word I was looking for there. So the hotel opens in 1855 and almost immediately becomes unprofitable. There are notices in the newspapers just a few months after it opened, the hotel cutting rates, having to downplay rumors that it was in financial difficulties. And Newhall, he ran it for about 10 years and, you know, was, again, wouldn't really say it, but I got the impression from everything that I read of him, and again, what you read in the papers, that he was kind of operating this as, you know, a civic gesture towards the city, just to keep it open. After he sells it, it passes through different hands a number of times. It closes for a while in the 1860s, at which point a group of local businessmen form a syndicate to take it over again, just to keep it open. Now, by this time, I think we see it here into the 1870s now. You know, the idea that Milwaukee is going to catch up with Chicago, or that a hotel is going to be, you know, enough to propel Milwaukee. By this time, Chicago is one of the great cities of the nation. Milwaukee is a big city too, but it's nothing, you know, in the class of Milwaukee, or of Chicago or New York or Boston. And the idea that something like a hotel is going to do that has been pretty much dismissed by now. But there is sort of this, you know, this local pride that wants to keep the building just functioning, lit, keep the lights on. So this business syndicate takes it over. They're operating again more or less as just a gesture of goodwill to the city, just to keep it from sitting there and rotting, which you see as kind of embarrassment. There's a number of changes that occur over the years. If I can figure out how to look back here. So you see there again near the time of its opening. Not sure if you're able to see my mouse cursor here as I do this, but if you look at the roof of the hotel, there's this cupola, which is sort of the trademark of the hotel when it opens. That's an area that the public, whoever is there passing by, is free to go up and look. It's said to offer one of the great views of the area. You can see for miles in every direction. It's really, again, the centerpiece of the building. But by the 1870s, that's been removed, oddly enough, in the name of fire safety. And you can see it's well, maybe you can't really see here, but by this time it's starting to show its age a little bit. What was state of the art in 1857 on into the late 1870s, 1880s is kind of dated. It is one of the first buildings one of the first hotels in the city to be electrified, to have electric lights. But by the 1880s, is kind of run down, sort of seen as, at this point, no longer even Milwaukee's finest hotel. There are, half dozen other buildings in the city that are taller than it, including, if you know where we are in downtown Milwaukee, this would be, this is Michigan Street right here, and then this would be Broadway running along the long front of the hotel. That is the same corner as the Chamber of Commerce building and the Mitchell building are right across the street, right across Michigan Street from this. They are both taller than it. They are considered more ornate, more of a, in the 1880s, if you would have visited Milwaukee and bought that little packet of picture postcards that a lot of cities had at the time, the Newhall House would not have been among those pictures, even though, again, back, not even about 25 years prior, this was considered really, the gem of the Midwest. So by January 10th, 1883, which is when our story begins, the hotel is kind of a fading relic. It has its some very dedicated clientele. There are about 100 guests in the hotel that night. They're roughly split more or less evenly between residents of the hotel, people who live there, who either live there full-time or just hold full-time rooms there. Some people kept rooms there for traveling because it was near the train depots and that, or they just lived there full-time. The other half are travelers. Among those, have a lot of number of theater companies that are traveling through. This was near the theater district, enough so that it was kind of considered the stop for traveling theater performers. Traveling salesmen made up the bulk of the guests in the house that night. Mostly absent are people traveling for pleasure. This is, as I said, January 10th. Then, like now, that's kind of a dead time for tourism. You've done Christmas, you've done New Year's. The hotel is about 1/3 occupied overall. There are another about 70 people in the hotel that night who work there. There's a small staff on duty. There's also what they would call domestics at the time, women who worked there. All of them lived on site in the 5th floor of the hotel, the 5th and 6th floors along the back alley. That was the domestics quarters, where you had women who worked in the kitchen, the laundry, housekeepers. They lived there. There are a few male employees of the hotel who lived there as well. So again, in total, I think about 170 some people in the building that night. So here we can see a layout of the floor plan of the hotel. Let me just back up here. So again, you can see the broad side of the building. This was along Broadway. the shorter end here, this would be to the south of the building. That's Michigan Street. And there is the center of the building. I've never been able to find a photo of it, but you see how this is situated here. This open space in the middle that's actually, forget the word for it, but the, not an atrium, but I forgot what I'm looking for. But anyway, that's an open space. It goes all open all the way to the roof to allow the rooms that are in the center of the building sunlight. Now the fire begins in the basement near the bottom of the elevator shaft. And this little gray square here is where the that's where the elevator is. Of course, they didn't have an elevator when they opened the building. It's added in the 1870s. Another one of those things to try to modernize the structure. The elevator shaft goes all the way to the basement. It is very basically speaking a wooden column that goes all the way up to the roof and has an open roof at the top. There is a smaller covering above the shaft, but there are vents to allow the elevator to move freely up and down the shaft. And that's something important to remember in just a bit. So the fire starts around 3:45 a.m. Most everybody in the building is asleep at this point. There's, again, a staff of 3 that are active right now. There's a man at the front desk. There is the, for lack of a better term, a porter who took guests to their rooms as they arrived and operated the elevator. And then there is the boiler operator who's in the basement. The fire is discovered by the porter who's riding the elevator. He's just dropped somebody on a higher floor. He's coming back down. He notices smoke coming up from the floor of the elevator. So he stops. The smoke gets too thick. He gets off at on the third floor, goes down to the second floor where the main desk was. He tells the man at the desk, there's a fire in the basement. They go down to the basement. By the time they get down there, the smoke is too thick for them to actually get to the origin point of the fire. And this is, again, 3:45, 3:46 in the morning. In my research, I've determined that it was this couple of minutes here that really sealed the fate of the building. There was an attempt by the boiler operator they shouted to him about the fire to get to it, to put some water on it. They had fire hoses on site. They were not tested regularly. They were obviously not used regularly. The fire hose he grabbed had basically conformed to the shape in which it hung on the wall. He couldn't unwind it. He couldn't get water to go through it. The 2 men that I mentioned earlier, they were not able to get to the source of the fire. They ran back upstairs. One of them went to go notify the man, the proprietor of the hotel at that time, who lived in an adjacent building. There was not quite a skywalk, but it was connected to the hotel. He went to wake up the proprietor of the hotel. The other man called the fire department. Now, there's a lot of dispute over the instructions and what these people were supposed to do in the event of a fire. They had a number of fires at the hotel prior to this. Their instructions were kind of vague, but they had the idea that not necessarily the last thing they should do, but they should not wake the guests until absolutely necessary. Of course, they're trying to run a business here, but they don't want everyone in the hotel woken up for any little fire that might start out. That can be put out without putting anybody in danger. So in this couple of minutes, they make these decisions that the fire could be fought. The fire department could get there in time. They might be able to get a hose on it. And in wasting these minutes, that gives the fire, again, starting at the bottom of the elevator shaft. By the time they've started to make decisions, they've decided not to wake people. They've Instead of waking people up, going to get the guy, kind of the boss to just get an idea of, to have him tell them what to do. By the time they made all these decisions, the fire has already reached the roof via the elevator shaft. Again, that shaft with an open top, with the air outside very cold, with the air inside the hotel warmer. It's basically acting as a flue to deliver this fire to every floor of the hotel. And within minutes, without being able to fight the fire at all, just again, about 5 minutes after the fire is discovered, in my opinion, the hotel is pretty much already doomed. So by the time the fire department gets there, about 10 minutes after the discovery of the fire, 10 to 15 minutes later, they get inside, they look down the elevator shaft, it's at that point just glowing. At this point, there's already smoke pouring out of the roof of the hotel. The fire department can report seeing this as they approach. That guy who went to wake the owner of the hotel, he would have gone down, again, if you can see my mouse here, I'm not sure, but he would have gone down this hallway. And here we can see, this is the new hall at the far right of the photo. The building to the left of that was where some additional rooms were added. And that little space between them, that is the alley. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So there was a little bridge that connected the two buildings. So that guy, the desk clerk, or the porter rather, he ran to wake up the proprietor. As soon as he realized what was going on, he said, "Wake the house, get everybody out, call the fire department." And by that point, the smoke is already too thick in that hallway for them to get back into the hotel. So they go down through this building on the left here, go down to the street level. And by that point, about 10 minutes in, and fire's coming through the roof. The fire department has just arrived. On the streets, the few people who are out there, it's described as, pandemonium growing already. However, inside, none of the guests have yet been woken up. So the fire department at this point, they've gotten inside. They have looked down the elevator shaft. They realize any attempt to fight the fire from inside is impossible. And they've also make a fatal error in assuming, if we go back here, oops, there we go. Again, these two little Pac-Man type shaped things, these represent the spiral staircases. North stairs and south stairs. The south stairs, that's right next to the elevator shaft. That's where the fire department goes. That's where most of the action so far has been taking place, in this half of the hallway. Of course, that's right near the fire. There's a lot of smoke there. Again, 10, 15 minutes in, this is virtually impassable. You can't, it's become very difficult to breathe. You can't see. The northern half of the hotel was quite a bit clearer at that time, especially on the upper floors. Assuming that the entire hotel had become that impassable, the fire department pulled back. They went back out onto the streets. They were going to fight the fire from outside. They were going to do the lifesaver from outside. So they start unloading their equipment out the street. Now we're 15, 20 minutes into the outbreak of the fire. Again, nobody in the house has been woken up. Nearly every account I was able to find of a survivor of this fire called being woken up by smelling smoke, by hearing screams, by the transoms above their doors, the pressure from the heat in the hallways shattering those. A few people have are woken up by guests, other guests, strangers, staggering into their room because they went out into the hallways, got disoriented, got lost, and just pushed through the first door they could find. About 15 minutes in, as the fire department is unspooling their firefighting equipment, people start appearing at the windows of the hotel. Again, this is right around the time of the fire. Now, the fire department at that time is very poorly equipped to do what they need to do. They have one ladder in the fire department that was capable of reaching the very top of the hotel. The sixth floor windows, which there were a number of people staying on the sixth floor. That particular piece of equipment belonged to a fire company that I believe had, I think they were, I forget the exact numbers, but I think there were 6 men on each fire company, or 8 or whatever it was, but the fire company didn't have enough men to operate this piece of machinery. It was very big, it was very heavy. It had never been used. They weren't trained in it. A lot of this ladder work, they weren't trained in that. If you'll notice, it's sort of hard to see in this picture here, but if you look right at the corner, you can see excuse me, this telegraph pole. Now these telegraph wires surround the entire hotel. The hotel being a focus of business, and telegraph being the premier technology at the time, it was kind of a hub for communication. So there were banks of these telegraph wires surrounding nearly the entire building. And these wooden ladders that the fire department had, ranging up to, I think they're the longest rigid wooden ladder was 30 or 40 feet maybe, but they couldn't get those up from the streets to get them to the hotel, because they had to be swung underneath the telegraph wires. If you look right above the long sidewalk here, right above all these storefronts, you'll notice a little balcony running the length of the hotel. Again, that's running up to the second floor of the building was the first floor of the hotel. The bottom floor here was storefronts. What the fire department needed to do was run a ladder up to this, and then run a taller ladder off of that narrow balcony up to the higher windows. If you look around the windows, notice all that decorative stuff there. They're deep set windows. They have wide sills, tall window caps. A nightmare to try to get a ladder up to a certain person in a certain window. Moving these ladders was very difficult. These things were very heavy. The fire department had jumping sheets. Like they would do in the old cartoons, they pull out those things and somebody jumps from a high floor. To properly support one of those so that somebody could jump from a high level and survive, you needed something like 35 men holding onto it. This was, that was almost a quarter of the fire department was required. So the life-saving efforts were very panicked. It was very messy. If you would have been a witness on that night, knowing what you do about modern fire safety and fire rescue, it would look like these people had no idea what they were doing. And this is, as the fire develops, or progresses rather, most of the people on the first floor of the hotel, again, the second floor of the building, they were able to make it out. They had the best survival rate. A lot of them woke up with the smoke. The hallways were still clear enough at that point they could make their way out. The higher you were in the hotel, the less your chances were of surviving. So as this is going on, people are appearing in the windows. People are staggering out of the house. Again, there's basically only 1 or 2 people, 2 or 3 people who later turn up to have been inside trying to get anybody out, because it was very hard, very tough conditions inside to get around, and again outside trying to get those ladders up, very difficult. You also notice that this street here on the image running from left to right, that street slopes downward. So that means if you're working on the shorter side of the building, trying to get up to those windows, that's additional, it's an additional 10 feet or so compared to the very northern end of the building. Working down there, very, very difficult as well. I'm not sure of the exact timing, but at some point, people just begin to jump. I mentioned those jumping sheets earlier. Some of those, they did get a few of those out. They pulled them out. I think 2 or 3 people jumped for them. One woman, she missed the sheet completely. Another man hit it and went right through. After that, pretty much nobody was considering using those. The descriptions of people jumping range from, people who climb or trying to climb down these window caps to the window sills, sliding down, drain spouts. One man jumped and tried to grab on to telegraph wires. So the accounts range from that jumping as a means of escape to nearer to the end of the part of the fire where people could still get out, where people were just jumping to choose that fate rather than being burned. And the 45 minutes into the fire, really the most wrenching part of this whole story takes place. And that was with the women who worked at the hotel and lived on the 5th floor of the building along the alley. So again, the Newhall House being the building shown on the right here. The 1st floor down from the very top, that's the 5th floor. And along that narrow alley there, which so this is in the lower left of the photo. That street is Water Street, downtown Milwaukee. The other one is Michigan. And these 2 buildings here in the foreground, those still stand today. Obviously, the Newhall House isn't standing today, but that alley that runs between them is still there. And there was an attempt made by the boiler operator to wake up the women who lived on the 5th floor because his sister worked at the hotel and lived there. She didn't live on the 5th floor, but obviously in that panicked scenario right away when we saw the fire, we knew it was going to be very bad. That's where his thoughts were. So he went up there very quickly, shouted fire, tried to get people up, spent just a few seconds knocking on doors, trying to make enough of a commotion to get people to realize what was going on. That was probably the last part of the hotel also be taken by smoke. So it was a very gradual process, them waking up, realizing what was going on. Because of the layout of the hotel, their particular hallway wasn't filled with smoke. But by the time they were able to smell the smoke, even to look out the windows and see the reflection of the fire off the buildings across the street, escape from their hall was pretty much impossible. There were a few who managed to basically just disappear into the smoke and managed to make it out. But a number of them, the casualty rate, again, among those, I think it was 60-some women who lived on that hall was very high. A lot of them asphyxiated in the smoke. And near the very end of I call the active part of the fire, when there were still people in the building who could be saved, about a dozen of them ended up trapped in a single room on this 5th floor. And well, probably about 20 were actually stuck in there. A number of them, I think 7 in total, jumped out of their windows into the alleyway again, not making any attempt to escape. Actually, one of the more interesting things I found out about this was after the book had come out, I ended up at another event for a book I had contributed a short story to, and ended up on this author's panel sitting next to a woman whose great aunt had died in the fire. She was one of the who worked on this fifth floor, and she told me that family legend. The family legend was that this was this girl. This was an Irish Catholic girl. She wanted to jump out of the hotel so that she had accepted that she was going to die, but she wanted to make sure her parents could find her body so she could be buried in consecrated ground. And most all the women who were on there were either German or Irish, first generation or second generation for the most part. But from this part of the building also comes probably the greatest act of heroism that night. Two firefighters, and having very little success, or very slow success in saving people from the exterior of the building. When they realized what was happening, they ran a 20-some foot ladder over to Water Street. They broke into one of these buildings here along Water Street. And again, if you look at that alley, you can see it's a very short distance between those two buildings. Now, it wasn't from this didn't occur in the building you see here. It was further to, it will be the left of that building as we look at it now. But the building they got into, the back of that went all the way up to the alley, as did the Newhall house. It just so happened that the spot they got was right across the alley from the room where all these women, the women who were still alive, were huddled. And these two firefighters took this 24-foot ladder, a rigid ladder, and they stood it up and dropped it from the roof of this hotel, and it was exactly long enough to reach from the ledge of that roof right onto the windowsill of the room where these women were. Again, they didn't know what this distance was. They were just hoping that this ladder would be long enough, and it was by a few inches. And once they got that ladder there, they were able to. There was one woman who was still fairly alert in that room. She was able to wake everybody up, and a lot of those women actually just walked across the ladder, about 75 feet above the alley. I think it was 8 of them were able to escape that way. His firefighter, a man by the name of Herman Strauss, he had to cross the ladder and carry a few more on his back. There was one woman who just before this, she was in the room next to this room. The room she was in, she was with 2 other women who had died, and she actually went out the window, standing on the window ledge, and stepped over to the next window ledge and swung inside that window because she could hear the voices of people still alive in that window. So she was able to escape over the ladder as well. And after those 2 rooms, or after it was realized that there was nobody left to save in those 2 rooms, they pulled the ladder back across, went back down to the streets. There was one more person who would make it out of the hotel. She would not survive, but she managed to crawl out of one of the windows and die shortly after. And that was it. Everyone at that point who was in the hotel was going to stay in the hotel, and this was about 4:45 in the a.m., so roughly an hour after the fire had started. The building burned for about another hour and a half before collapsing, and there we see the ruins, photo taken the next day, of what was left of the Newhall house. You can see those telegraph wires quite clearly. So that's about. Oh, and you can also, I'll point out too, this again, the building here on the left of the image. That was that one also here on the left of the image. So you can see, how they were connected And again, you can't really see the building. It doesn't really show up here where the ladder rescue would have occurred. But again, it was about the same height as this. So you can get that idea of just how precarious that was in getting those last. And they saved about, in total, I think about 12 women that way went across the ladder, and they would be the last people to go to the Newhall house alive. So that's about 2/3 of the story. Of course, the what we have left here, what you see here is, what I call the largest mass grave since the Civil War at the time. There were 50-some people still in the ruins. A number of them, a good majority of the people who went down with the hotel would remain unidentified. The bodies themselves, that is, would remain unidentified. About 20-some more who had managed to get out of the house that night, either died shortly thereafter, died later of their injuries. My count has it that 75 lives were lost on the night of the fire. So there's also the matter of how this fire started. And that's, I won't get too into that just in this talk this evening, but there was a man who was charged with arson for starting this fire. It was the man who ran the bar in the hotel's basement. The story went that he was down on his luck, needed money, and he had devised a plan to set fire to his bar room to collect on the insurance. And then the fire got out of control. He was arrested a few days after. The fire. The scene would have looked very much like this. At the time he was arrested, there were rumors that he was going to be broken out of jail and lynched for this. He was really, really vilified at the time. He was arrested. He was known to have a drinking problem. He was a known character around town. Somebody who hung out with sort of a seedy element. After his arrest, a lot of stories came out about previous attempts to possibly collect on insurance. He basically went on a 3-day bender after this. He was actually on the night before the fire. He'd been scolded by the hotel proprietor for his drinking, just considered to be a very bad way. When he was arrested for this, the arresting officer asked him if he had a pistol on him, and his reply was, "If I had a pistol, I'd have already used it to blow my brains out." It gives you an idea of his state at the time. But as it turned out, the case against him was incredibly thin. The story of how the case presented by the prosecution just didn't add up. Where he was supposed to have started the fire really wasn't near where any of his things were. The stories about him needing money were exaggerated. It was a lot of rumor, a lot of innuendo. And a couple months later, by the time he's acquitted, after the rubble's been cleaned up, after all these people have been buried, again, this is somebody who they actually had to get out of town after his arrest and keep him at a secure location to keep him from being killed. By the time he's acquitted by the jury after a deliberation of about 5 minutes, he's, I don't want to say greeted as a hero upon being released from jail, but people are glad that he didn't, that he was acquitted. Shaking hands. People are glad to see him. He's once again a well-regarded man around town. And after that, the interest in prosecuting this as a criminal offense kind of goes away. Speaking just a moment about fire investigation, I did talk to some fire investigators when I was researching this book. I read a lot on it, and I guess sort of the secret about fire investigation, as I took it, is that it's still an incredibly inexact science. And in 1883, it wasn't a science at all. There's no physical evidence to connect anybody to this, but one story brought forth during the trial, the one that I have come to believe is, excuse me, being most plausible, is that the fire was set accidentally by a homeless person who had gone into the basement on what was a very cold night and started a campfire to keep warm. This is something that was known to have happened at the Newhall house. The doors to the basement were not locked. Hotel staff had chased people out of there numerous times in the run up to the fire. And also, when they were, the very last body they took out of this crime scene was body from the basement. It was unidentifiable, but it was back in a part of the basement that no one trying to escape would have gotten to. It would have seemed that there had been somebody in the basement when the fire started, somebody was unaccounted for in the guest registries and so on, that was unfamiliar with the layout and had essentially tried to escape the fire into a corner and then gotten caught there. And this, that was reported in the newspapers. It's just a few months later. By that point, nobody really seemed to be interested in this thing. One of the fascinating things about this fire is how quickly everybody wanted to forget it. Part of the myth about this is that it led to this great reform against for fire safety in the city. That it basically cleaned things up so this would never happen again. Nothing of the sort happened. The only law that was changed in response to this was that prior to this, hotels needed to have fire escape ropes on the 3rd floor and higher. That was just a rope, basically, that was in the room that you could throw out the window to climb down if there was a fire. After the fire, they changed that to the 2nd floor and higher. So one extra floor on the hotel got ropes. There were numerous things. How buildings were built, how the fire department was trained, how these wires, cables were situated, regulations on fire hoses, fire buckets, fire walls, all of these things that could have been done to improve the safety of buildings. None of them were enacted. Really, this is 1883. It's not until the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire a number of years later that fire reform becomes a thing and gains any ground at all. So the aftermath of the fire is just kind of one of, well, let's move on from that. Let's focus on Milwaukee's future, not worry about this, not get caught in this. Again, just as the drive to build the hotel, the drive to keep it open, it was very forward thinking. This was a negative kind of attitude that the city didn't want to deal with. I know this is at the point, if we were at a library or wherever, I would show this off to everybody, but this is, I've also, usually when I do these things, there are a few passages I read from the book. Again, at a library, bookstore, whatever. I found that doesn't really work well on Zoom, so I'm not going to read anything from the book tonight, but I would still like to share this thing. This is something I found on eBay, of all places, a few years ago, and this is, I guess it's more impressive if you actually can see it in person, but this is something I have hanging on my wall, and this is a cover of a artistic periodical that was apparently, according to this script, recovered from the fire that evening. So you can see the relic of the Milwaukee fire. Got the Newhall House Hotel, the date, and about 70 people burned to death. 43 bodies are burned beyond recognition. So I'll present this as kind of an odd memorial of that night. There are accounts of people kind of scouring through the ruins for souvenirs like this, and again, more impressive you can actually see in person, but I did still want to share that. So that's the story of the Newhall house, of the fire that ruined it, and then a little bit about the aftermath of or the lack of aftermath that came later. The site today is there's a hotel there again, the Hilton Garden Inn, which is built right into the footprint of the old hotel. The building, it only became a hotel recently, but the building, I think, was completed in 1890. It was an insurance office building for many, many years, and as kind of put this thing full circle again. By the time they cleared that and started construction on the new building, there was no talk of the hotel, no talk of the lives lost or the lessons that could have been learned from that. Again, they were just boasting about how Milwaukee was soon to have one of the finest insurance buildings in all of the country, and it's going to have this very long pool of offices that was the envy of anything out east. So that was how they memorialized this, at least on the site at the time. There is a proper memorial in Forest Home Cemetery where some of the remains were buried, but if you were downtown at any point, you would have never known that the hotel had ever been there or had ever burned down. And that's where I'll leave it. If anybody does have any questions, I'd be glad to take those now.
Matthew, thank you for a very nice presentation. If people want to ask Matthew questions, you'll need to unmute yourself. Matthew, in terms of other hotel fires around the country, how does this compare to other ones that you may have not be familiar with?
Sure. This was up until 1947, this is the deadliest hotel fire in U.S. history. That was near the Winecoff Hotel in Atlanta, burned down. I forget how many people died in that fire, but I mean, it was, just searching newspapers, you'd see references to it periodically. It was kind of for a number of generations, especially right around the time, it was a known tragedy. But the memory of that kind of faded. But I think, I don't remember, it's weird to rank these things, but it is among the worst hotel fires in U.S. history.
You talked about how there was no kind of reaction to it in terms of changes. Any speculation as to why it didn't have more of an impact?
It wasn't a very, and I do get into this. There is a passage that I usually read when I do this in person, but 1883 had a number of really awful, mass death events. There was on the Patapsco River near Baltimore, a pier collapsed while a ferry boat was leaving, and 63 people drowned. There was a flooded mine in Braidwood, Illinois. They killed 47. Train wrecks. There was on the Brooklyn Bridge that year, which had just opened. People were walking across it or hanging out there or whatever. There's a scream and some confusion, and there was this, people thought that the bridge was collapsing. So there's a mass rush to get off of that, and 12 people were killed. Internationally, horrible events. There's a shipwreck that kills 134. The horrible event in England where a bunch of children are killed when they're rushing forth to get free candy from the stage. Stuff happened like this all the time, and it was just, I think it was kind of passed off as, well, those are the costs of progress. It's a very forward moving era, very quickly developing era in terms of building cities, what was considered technology at the time. Nobody wanted to put the brakes on to address any of these issues. These were just considered, collateral damage, I guess. Wasn't that long after the Civil War. I think people were just kind of desensitized to things like that. Here today, that word is used a lot. Obviously, mass shootings is the thing that comes to mind, but back then it was more visceral. People would have, pretty much anybody would have known somebody who fought in the Civil War. Probably have known people who were maimed or killed. What we call now post-traumatic stress disorder. Barely even had a word for it back then. There's people. This is a very traumatized, very violent era, and I don't think things like this really registered as, there were people advocating for it, I'm sure, but it doesn't. Nobody wanted to stop to analyze it. It was just keep building, keep moving forward, I think.
I suppose it's also an era of pretty weak government at the time, so it wasn't
Yeah, it was
kind of the norm for a governmental response.
Yeah, there was also an attempt to try to hold the owners of the hotel responsible for negligence, but I doubt there were many buildings. Obviously, more modern buildings. There were some that they called fireproof at the time, but if that's after the fact, a lot of people started referring to the hotel as a fire trap, and there was one comment at the time that if this building's a fire trap, 90% of the city is a fire trap.
Any other questions for Matthew?
Were there any firemen that were seriously injured or killed?
No, well, I'm not too sure about injuries, but no, nothing. None of them were killed. Again, most of them were. By the time they got there, there wasn't. Well, they had decided that there wasn't much to do inside, so most of the life-saving action, firefighting action, was done from the outside. So I don't know of anybody who was seriously injured, but the fire chief, Chief Lippert at the time, who was on the scene commanding things, he retired shortly after, died not long after that. A number of Herman Strauss, the guy I mentioned, who went across the ladder to save those women, he quit shortly after. Again, we'd recognize it now as some kind of post-traumatic stress event, but they weren't talking like that back then. But so nobody died on the scene, but there were people who wore those scars for long.
Other questions for Matthew? Matthew, thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me.
We appreciate
I
it very
look
much.
forward to being able to see everyone in person someday.
Sounds good. And we will look forward to seeing the rest of the people for our May presentation. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.